Hello everyone, and welcome to your video on manipulating equations. So I have a couple of equations here. These you should recognize. RT equals D, that's our classic rate times time equals distance formula, very popular. Here we have V equals LWH, which means that the volume stands for the length times the width times the height. This would be the volume of a three-dimensional box, for instance. We would have the length and the width and the height, multiply those together, and that gives you the total volume. And then we have this funkier looking equation, which is the volume of a cone, which I will try to draw for you right there. And you just have to imagine that this is three-dimensional, like that. Okay. So there's three formulas that we're going to work with. You know that they're asking you to manipulate an equation. Manipulate just means to mess with. So they're asking you to mess with an equation when they say things like this. Express t as a function of r and d. Or solve in terms of h. Or, more intimidating, express h in terms of v. In other words, they want you to mess with these equations so that this is all by itself on one side of the equal sign. So if we wanted to get t by itself, we would have to get rid of r, and we would do that by dividing both sides by r, and that would leave us with t equals d over r. That is the answer. We have now expressed t as a function of r and d. Right? Because that's what's on the other side of the equation. Here we have solve in terms of h. In other words, they want h on one side of the equation. So how are we going to get rid of this L and W? Well, the L and W are being multiplied to h. So to get rid of them, we will divide. So h is going to equal V over length times width. And that is manipulating the equation. Here, we're being asked to express h in terms of v. So in other words, we want to get h by itself. So we have to divide by 1/3 by pi and by r squared. And if we do it to that side of the equation, we have to do it to the other. Now, the thing that makes this a little bit tricky is that we have a v divided by a 1/3, which is the same thing as 3v divided by pi r squared. I'm going to talk about this for just a second. If we have a v divided by 1/3, we could write that v divided by 1/3, which is v times the reciprocal of 3 over 1, which is 3v. That's how I knew that that was 3v up here. 3v divided by pi r squared. Okay, so that's what it means to manipulate equations. And again, it's going to talk about expressing or solving in terms of one of the particular variables. Now you might be asking yourself, why in the world would I ever need to do this? Why would I need to manipulate an equation? Well, that's a good question. Let's take a nice simple equation. Let's take, not even that equation. Let's take an area equation, length times width. So we have this plot of land here, and we want our area to always equal 100 square inches or square feet or whatever. You're making a garden. Let's say this is square feet. Square feet. Okay, and we know that we're going to have a width and we know that we're going to have a length. Okay? If the length is, here, let's do this. If the length is 2, what does our width need to be? Well, area equals length times width. Our area is our 100. Our length is 2. Our W we're trying to figure out. Divide both sides by 2. We get W equals 50. Okay, but what if I said to you that the length was 4? Then what would my width be? Well, That's area equals length times width. So that's 100 equals 4 this time, W. Divide both sides by 4, we get W equals 25. Okay, that's all well and good, but what if I said that the length was 6? Well, we have A equals LW. Our area is 100. This time our length is 6. Our width is W. We'll divide both sides by 6. We get W equals 100 over 6, which reduces to 50 over 3. 50 divided by 3. Okay, but what if I said I also wanted you to calculate the appropriate width for all these numbers, 2.2, 2.8, 3.10, 9.7, 10.4, and so on. Well, at that point, you would probably start to get a little sick of this. And so at this point, you might want to say, I'm always solving for W, so I could write my equation in terms of W. So I could get rid of that L. W equals A divided by L. So every time they ask me for another one, I don't have to write all this rigmarole down. Instead, I can just put in my calculator 100 divided by 2.2. Boom. 100 divided by 2.8. Write it down. Boom. 100 divided by 3.10. Boom. So in other words, it just lets you do lots of repetitive calculations a little bit more quickly without writing it out and solving for the variable that maybe is buried someplace else. If you get that variable off by itself, then you have a nice, simple little equation that you can use. And that is the whole point of manipulating equations.